Rotarians, guests, ladies and gentlemen, I met our guest speaker today when she sold me something I didn't realise I'd needed until just prior to our meeting. Tania Jolley is the managing director of a company called DNA Guardian, and in August last year I had need to meet her as a consequence of an incident with which I was involved. Some of you may know I'm a director of the Avoca Hotel, and we had the misfortune of having our gaming room held up in mid-August last year, one Sunday morning. Now, despite the fact that we were replete with CCTV cameras and all the rest of it, I have to say that the experience of an armed hold-up is far worse on staff and people than it is in terms of loss of physical assets and cash. Sadly, the two people that were primarily involved from our point of view no longer work for us, such as the effect of the trauma of the event and so on. Shortly thereafter, I was introduced to Tania through a third party. And straight away, quite apart from the fact that we've now got the system installed, Tania made an immediate impression. Here's a lady who's done a fantastic job with blending technology, an obvious need in the community, and the capacity to blend what I thought was just amazing technology to provide a very sophisticated product into the market in which she's working. The title of her address today is The Accidental Entrepreneur. So rather than me banging on about it anymore, I'd like to introduce Tania to you to tell you a bit about the DNA Guardian story and her role in it. So Tania, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much. And Steve, thank you for such a warm welcome. And to everybody today, thank you for a lovely reception. As Steve said, he invited me here today to share my story and my journey with you. So I hope I'll be somewhat entertaining while you finish your lunch. I will try my best. My first encounter with Rotary actually goes way back to the 1980s when my dad joined the Prospect Rotary Club. I've very fond memories of fundraising barbecues and other activities with many other generous families where we all came together for the fun of being together and the ability to give back to others. They were really great times during my childhood, and it's great to see this legacy continuing. So congratulations to all of the members here today on what you achieve. I've been asked to share my journey with you all from idea to commercialisation and beyond. I call myself the accidental entrepreneur because when I was asked as a younger girl what I wanted to be in life, I certainly didn't envisage the road that I've been now travelling for almost 2 decades. Back when I was at school, the words entrepreneur, innovation and disruption were definitely not the buzzwords around town, I can assure you. In fact, I had many a teacher that used to frown when I put my hand up yet again to say, excuse me, but why does it have to be like that? So I was that kid, and I've always been inquisitive, and I do believe that it is this inquisitiveness that has led me to where we are today. DNA Security Solutions is a fiercely proud South Australian company. We are Australia's most innovative security company, as Steve mentioned, blending both what we call and refer to as advanced manufacturing electronics with forensic science. We've innovated and forged a new genre of security in Australia that we refer to as criminal marking technology. This technology has been incredibly successful. But what does success actually look like for us? And more importantly, what does success look like for our customers? It means eliminating crime altogether. There is no grey area. It's black or it's white. It either doesn't happen or it does happen. And our focus has been on armed robbery because this is the real gap in traditional security. Most security as we know it tends to be reactionary in nature. So when the alarm goes, it's gone off because somebody has already broken into your premise. You've got CCTV footage of somebody doing something wrong because they've already done the deed and you're just capturing a picture of it. We saw the need to actually be proactive, to send a message to the criminals that reduced their need or want to actually focus on you as a victim. So by raising the risk of being caught, this actually reduces their want to actually target you. Can I just get a bit of an indication? How many here today have actually been touched by robbery, either directly or indirectly within your family members? Okay, thank you. And I do usually get most people putting up their hands. It's a sad picture of the current state of our community, but it is actually the case. And so we must confront it and we must deal with it. Our story starts back in 2005 when we were dealing with a first generation product, and we had a lot to do with Neighbourhood Watch and SAPOL, and they were actually very, very frustrated. So the challenge was thrown to us by a few SAPOL officers. Can you come up with a solution to the biggest problem that SAPOL had, which was that they usually had no forensic connection between the criminal and the crime scene? Can you mark the thief at the crime scene so that the police can positively and irrefutably identify them as having been at the crime scene at the time that the crime was occurring, eliminating all false alibis? So we went away, and after a couple of years of R&D, we came up with a product that we called DNA Card Guard. It was a great product. It landed us on the ABC New Inventors. We were incredibly chuffed. We started our company and we thought that we were on our way. This was our first lesson. Police wanted a solution, but they weren't our customer and they didn't pay. So we found it very difficult to actually gain traction in the car market, even though that was, at that time in the vehicle market, we were experienced, we had a lot of networks, and we were very well known. But we just couldn't get any traction with the customer. However, we were very fortunate that from the beginning of our journey, we did take the approach that our technology needed to be very flexible and it needed to be global. We wanted it to be global, which meant that it needed to be easy to install because we weren't always going to be in control of the team that were looking to install the product. The flexibility meant that we were able to easily and cost-effectively roll that current platform into a solution for businesses, which we now refer to as DNA Guardian. So our second lesson was be focused on your customer, as they're the end user. They're the needs that we needed to address, and they would then pay for the solution. We did this in a time that Adelaide seemed to be besieged with armed robbery. I'm not sure if any of you remember the term Gang of 49. Okay, it was back in 2008 and 2009. Armed robbery in gaming rooms specifically skyrocketed 300% that year. Villies was even targeted on South Road, much to his total disgust, and servos and basically any business carrying cash were targets. Some nights, this gang went on the road and would have 10 businesses in one night. So they would have 10 incidences that police were all trying to respond to at the same time. Well, you can imagine them going to event number 1, and then by the time the 10th one has been called in, they're still trying to gather evidence at the first one. So it's a really tricky situation. They became the easy pickings of gangs, that is, the gaming rooms. High cash holdings, average security at best, and criminals saw this as very low risk to them. Bank robberies had become a thing of the past due to the bank's target hardening, and their pop-up physical screens and their locked access control doors made it very difficult to actually access the cash. You may have seen some DNA Guardian signs around the place in Adelaide at various businesses. The main industries that we do work with include certainly clubs and pubs, high-end manufacturing jewellers, pharmacies, service stations, and small convenience stores. However, we can actually provide a solution to anybody who has a security need or concern, and wants to do more than just the average. So we were finally off and running in 2009 after a lot of blood, sweat and tears and years of developing a concept that on paper was 100% foolproof. But real life got in the way and there were enormous challenges. The Eagles Bar on Port Road was our first real success story in 2009. We made a meeting with SAPOL because we realised that we had to show them what it was that we were doing, because this was going to be a tool that they could use in their repertoire to be actually able to capture these criminals. Well, it took about 30 seconds into our presentation, and one of the detectives there was so impressed with what he saw and what we were doing, and he was actually attached, he was a board director of the Woodville Footy Club, who own Eagles Bar, that he got some brochures and so forth from us, and he made the decision to adapt the technology in the Eagles Bar and Grill immediately. Now you ask why? They'd had 3 armed robberies in 12 months. So this gang was going back there and treating it like their own little lolly shop. And it was obviously a very, very embarrassing situation for this particular detective because it was his turf. Now, he knew the gang, he knew them, they knew that he knew that it was them, so it was a real cat and mouse game. He needed forensic evidence, and he wasn't able to get that from his cameras, and he wasn't able to get that from an alarm or from a security guard or anything else. Well, we installed our technology, and not less than 6 weeks later, the system was set off. We had phone calls from the police, we had phone calls from media. It was like nothing you had ever experienced in your life. Every television station, radio station, press was there at the scene, along with about 25 forensic SAPOL officers and 35 different SAPOL cars, and it was really quite incredible. The benefit of having us on television was fabulous as a company, but what it did do was it actually educated the criminals and the criminals' families very quickly that night what they had been caught up with, and they didn't realise that they had actually been marked and tagged at the crime scene. So the result from that was that they did actually flee the state. It took police about 12 to 16 weeks to be able to extradite them once they were caught interstate. And the intel that we got back from SAPOL was that they cried like babies in their cells when they got questioned. They understood they were caught by something, but they weren't really sure what it was. They weren't sure whether they're going to grow 3 eyes or 5 noses or 2 ears, or whether maybe one of their toes was going to drop off or something. Needless to say, we let those stories go and we let them find their own routes. But we were very pleased to see these criminals were caught and they were finally convicted for their crime. The biggest win that we have had from that is not just the fact that these people ended up behind bars, but since 2009, Eagles Bar and Grill have never had another armed robbery. We have kept them safe now for nearly 10 years. Not only that, no other venue in South Australia carrying our warning sign has been targeted by this gang in nearly 10 years either. So we have sent a very strong and powerful message to this gang that we're not willing to take their behaviour anymore lying down, and that we will come up with ways in which we can identify them and we can make them accountable for their actions. Signage is key to the communication with all criminals. We originally thought that when we started this company, we'd actually spend months or years in courtrooms trying to provide and defend that forensic link. So we actually thought that we would be constantly in court having to defend and help prosecutors. We quickly learnt that it was actually the ultimate deterrent for criminals. And that's why we actually deliver an entire strategy to our customers. We don't just focus on getting a product out there. We are actually about developing our story, about our communication. So we're not just like a one-hit widget wonder. And we've learnt to incorporate PR and social media to get our message out there. Once we got some traction and we proved our technology was enough to scare off the criminals, it became really hard. What? Like, that's not how it was supposed to work. We were being told by everybody that we would be millionaires and would be able to buy our own island like Richard Branson, and that we'd solved the problem of criminal activity. But success for us actually meant that nothing happened for our customers. So we just had to keep on persisting. So on my journey, I have met some of the most wonderful, brave people who have been involved in some really seriously horrendous things. But I've also met some of the worst. It does tend to be large corporations, and they don't quite have the same level of care or empathy for their staff and customers that they say that they might. And I have actually been told by senior executives in certain industries that their staff should just accept being faced with a gun or a knife because it's just part of their job. I mean, can you believe that? Seriously, we still live in a world today where you get paid $20 an hour and you're expected that that's what you might have to face. I refuse to believe that, and I refuse to be a part of a society that allows that type of thinking to continue. So we are the change that we want to see in society. And we are lifted up every day by our customers and by their staff. The hugs, the words of gratitude, the emails, the cups of coffee, the smiles that we get for what we do with them. And it continues to drive us, and it continues to stoke our passion for a safer world. The greatest challenges that we have had have also become our greatest successes. We've started a completely new vertical within the security industry, and the security industry as a whole has many stakeholders, so we have to work with and communicate with those stakeholders at the same time. We've personally bootstrapped every part of this operation to today, and we're very proud to be standing here with a successful, profitable and growing company with so many opportunities in front of us. It's often difficult to actually know where to focus. Our greatest lessons have included listening to your gut, not being distracted by what other people have to say, because they don't own your vision and they don't share your vision. And that's why we're often referred to as disruptors, because we are disrupting the normal throes, ebbs and flows of what people consider to be the norm. We stay focused and positive, and we listen to what our customers are wanting, the solutions that they're needing, and we're providing the technology that brings those solutions forward. Our growth trajectory is actually mind-blowing, and we have many different opportunities to develop. Last year we started exporting to New Zealand, and for a tiny country they have a massive amount of crime. This year the US is on our list, followed by the UK, South America and South Africa. In the US, they have 5,000 bank robberies every year. 5,000. And as we know, cannabis is legalised in many states in America. 50% of the cannabis shops are expecting to be robbed this year. That's their expectation. This is our starting point. We know that we have a solution that they're looking for, and now we just need to meet the right people and share our vision and share our story and share our successes in Australia and show them what we can do. We've research projects on the go with Flinders University, and we're looking to add nanotechnology into our offering. This will allow us to enter different verticals such as anti-counterfeiting, allow us to work with defence, allow us to work with pretty much any industry actually. Pharmaceutical industry is another big one that often suffers a lot of counterfeit goods, and a solution needs to be developed for them. Above everything else, we are actually an engineering company, and we love to collaborate. And we're a creative company that's focused on bringing new technology to life that offers great solutions. that's all I have for you today, given the time constraints that we've got. I'd like to thank everybody for being a fabulous audience, and if you've got any questions, I'd be really happy to answer them.
Great. I'll field the questions. And John Hunter.
Actually, what happened to them? They're all kids. Are they locked away because kids seem to get off? Naughty boy, you mustn't do that anymore. What's happened to them?
Okay, so the Gang of 49 was actually a term that the media came up with. So there was actually about 449 of them. It was a massive gang. They weren't all children. They did range from approximately 14 years in age up to about 29. They lived mostly out around the Murray Bridge area. They were a very well-coordinated gang, mostly Aboriginal, but certainly a lot of whites had gone into there as well. So what's happened, a lot of the ringleaders have gone into prison. Sadly to say, most of their sentences have actually expired, so many of them are now back out on parole. They haven't rehabilitated in prison, I'm sorry to say. They're going to come out and they are very likely to take up their old ways. That's the way society here deals with it. We really don't have rehabilitation programs in prison to deal with these guys properly.
Anybody else? David Mottram.
I just wonder, how do you get the DNA of the criminal when they come in and rob your business?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks for the question. I didn't want to make it a sales talk, so I really didn't want to talk too much about the technology. But essentially, what we do is we use what we call synthetic DNA. So we're not getting the DNA of the criminal. We're actually giving we're spraying onto the criminal as they're exiting the building a synthetically made DNA that sticks to their skin. So we're able to make a unique DNA code for every single venue that we deal with around the world. Okay? So what we're doing is we're actually giving, so with the evoker, we've given the evoker essentially a fingerprint, its own fingerprint. And if they ever need to turn the system on the way out, people who walk underneath the doorway will be sprayed and tagged with a unique fingerprint from the evoker. Does that make sense?
And if they try and smash the device or anything like that, it doesn't help. They get whacked with it anyway.
Yeah.
I had many occasions of being burgled at a retail shop and being ram-raided, etc. What's the cost of the system of putting it into your premises?
It's an interesting word, cost, you use. We like to use the word investment.
Yeah, well, it is. Absolutely.
Because what was the cost of your many ram raids and losses? Exactly. So the general investment that the average business in Australia will make will be somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000, maybe $8,000. We do have what we call preventative maintenance programs, so we work with you every 6 months to make sure that the technology is kept tip-top shape. But essentially, when you amortise this over the life of the units and what it is that we're doing, generally the cost is about $1.50 a day.
And look, I just have to say, and I'll declare my conflict of interest, we've installed the system, but the cost to your people is far greater than the physical loss. And you can't put a price on that. And also your clients. It had a very marked impact on our business. I can tell you that right now. So the cost of remediating it was an excellent proposition.
Thanks, Tania. I come from a country that probably leaves the US by dead in terms of numbers of robbery. But what I would expect is that if a premise is advertising that they've got this technology, people will go in with like an asbestos removal suit on and mask, so that basically as soon as they walk out, they get rid of that, and basically that is what's been sprayed, not themselves. So how do you fix that problem?
we don't fix the problem because we don't experience that. Don't you think that it's a little bit bizarre when someone walks around with an asbestos suit on and a face mask and kind of draws a bit of attention to them? They just move on to softer targets. That's the unfortunate nature of that. Why would you target? So we'll take a gaming room. You know, what has it got? It's got cash. Well, so does the next gaming room and the next one and the next one. So unless you're looking to steal the Pink Panther diamond from the only jewellery store in the world that has it, you just go to the path of least resistance. So you don't, the whole point of this is that this technology forensically connects you to the crime scene, and we only need to have a very small microscopic amount of it. You don't need to be, you know, slathered in it. We're talking very scientific small amounts. And if you take the suit off, even if we were to experience that type of thing, when you take the suit off, you don't walk down the road. So you've got your asbestos suit on, you've got your bag of cash, you've got your gun, and you're running to the car. You know, it's just not, it's not the reality. But even if you did take it off, you couldn't help but get it everywhere because it's a liquid, it's a water-based liquid. And so as you're getting your balaclava off or your gloves off, you know, you're spreading it everywhere. So he's still creating the connection. Okay. Maybe, you know.
They've got to shed the kit somewhere. Everything they touch, their vehicle, you name it. Yeah, but...
Yeah, it's very, when you start looking, when you're talking about forensic connections, you know, it's about creating the forensic connection, and it might not just be about directly on the skin to the courtroom. You might be talking about the suit, having it on, and then the underside of the suit has the forensic DNA of that person. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can, there's a lot of different ways that you can actually create that connection. And DNA, we spread DNA everywhere, wherever we go. So today you've left your DNA on your seat, on the tablecloth, on, you know, the cutlery that you've, you know, so it's very difficult to actually make sure that you eliminate that spread of science.
Tom Maxwell.
That's the most interesting talk. My question is about intellectual property. How are you protecting yourselves from all the intellectual property thieves that are around the world?
Intellectual property was the question. How are we protecting?
How are they protecting themselves against intellectual property thieves that are around the world?
Yeah, thank you. So we do actually have a patent. We did apply for an Australian patent, but it was more on the mechanical workings of our electronics technology. And we secured that back in 2007 under the advice of the state government and a number of advisors. Since then, we haven't actually gone on to do any more patent protection because we believe that Colonel Sanders' secret herbs and spices is far more difficult to crack than if you actually put your recipe out there and somebody can follow your pudding. So patent protection these days, the world is changing, and the understanding of protecting your goods and services and the different things that you have is these days more going along the lines of actually not getting patent protection than getting patent protection, because protection is a very loose word. And what we do here in Australia could quite easily be copied in America. We wouldn't know about it. It could be copied in China, it could be copied anywhere. And really, the only protection that you've got is how big is your bank account to fight it, because you've got to go to court to fight it. So if you don't put it out there in the first place, it's hard for people to copy, and it gives you much bigger barriers. So that's how we do it.
Howard Schultz is not going to like that, but are there any other questions?
So if I understand you correctly, your solution is like it's non-destructive. So you might even not notice that you got tagged, and especially with the goods. Sorry, so if it's non-destructive, but then you have with banks, as far as I understand in the US, so they try kind of like a more colorful solution to that like basically a similar approach. You have a liquid, if you open the bundle of money, it basically sprays onto you, and it sprays especially on the money, and so you can't actually use the money because everybody notices like this is money from a bank robbery.
The old bank bombs, yes.
Yeah, so in a sense things like, would you think that like your approach, because it doesn't destroy it. It's kind of like non-noticeable. It's better for certain situations, while the situations where like somebody who is desperate and is like on drugs might not care that like they actually get noticed, but they're just holding up to get the next shot. If you then kind of like show them like, look, you have something on the dollar bill, you can't actually use them, so that you have a separate, certain situations where a more destructive approach to kind of tagging might actually be more profitable, more kind of like hardening than your approach.
Look, I think every situation needs to be taken as an individual, but I would just answer that question very quickly to say if the bank bombs worked, there probably wouldn't be 5,000 armed robberies every single year. And the difficulty with that is that not all banks have bank bombs and use them, and not all robberies are included with a bank bomb either. So we, as I said, we've taken the approach that something different needed to be done to provide a solution, because clearly the current technology of cameras and alarm systems and even guards wasn't doing the job, because we still had a very significant increase and we still see a very significant amount of armed robbery happen in our community. So we've taken the approach that we are actually sending a very psychological message to criminals, right? And this is one that is changing their behaviour. I mean, I know that it works. We've replicated this now in dozens and dozens of cities and towns around Australia. For the last 10 years, we have the same result. We've got over 99% success for our customers, and what that means is that 99% of our customers eliminate crime once they adopt our technology. And that's just something that no other security technology has been able to achieve in the last 100 years. So we're very proud of that. But, of all the customers that we have across Australia, we may have one customer every 2 years that might experience an armed robbery, whereby you have a naive criminal just bounding their way in. And it's not a golden bullet solution, but it's certainly a hell of a lot better than what we've got out there. And I must say that we're not advocating that everybody should get rid of all the other security. It's just the missing link. Okay, so you need good quality CCTV cameras to point the police in the right direction so they know who they're looking for. But once they get there, they need to have that added step to make sure that they can eliminate all these false alibis and they can actually prove that these people were not only just at the premise, but at the premise at the time that crime was occurring.
Thanks very much, Tania. Look, just pick up on that. Security in any environment is multi-layered. You've got to have a bunch of options. I just do a quick advertorial on behalf of the South Australian Police. When our facility got robbed, the police were there within 90 seconds of the perpetrators leaving the scene. Their conduct was absolutely fantastic, the way they set up the crime scene and all the rest of it. We had excellent CCTV footage, and we had a series of tip-offs. That's how they were caught. They were amateurs. But this stuff deals with, it doesn't matter how good they are. So there's no silver bullet, as Tania just said, but it's a bit like deterrence. We haven't had a nuclear war since 1945, but we've had nuclear weapons. And the consequences of that is what has deterred rational people. That's a thought to take away. So, on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank Tania for what I knew would be a terrific presentation, and a tribute to entrepreneurship and the blending of technology, marketing, and the host of other things it takes to make a good business. So on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to present you, Tania, with our amazing rotary pen.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Use it wisely.
Yeah.